CD2. American English File, 3rd edition, Student Book 5, by Christina Latham Koenig, Clive Oxenden, and Jerry Lambert. Published in copyright Oxford University Press, 2021. 3.1.
Sophie was heartbroken, but she is one of France's best-known avant-garde artists.
3.2. 1.
I made a real faux pas when I mentioned his ex-wife.
2.
When we were introduced, I had a sense of déjà vu, though I knew we'd never met before.
3.
We used to have a secret rendezvous every Thursday at the Museum of Modern Art.
4.
She's engaged to a well-known local entrepreneur.
5.
I know it's a cliché, but it really was love at first sight.
6.
On our anniversary, he always buys me a huge bouquet of flowers.
7.
I met Jane's fiancé last night. They're getting married next year.
8.
They knew their parents wouldn't want them to get married, so they did it anyway and presented them with a fait accompli.
3.3. Phrases with get. Expressions with get. 1.
I get the impression you're a little annoyed with me.
2.
You'll get a shock when you see him. He looks awful.
3.
Since we stopped working together, we hardly ever get the chance to see each other.
4.
Everyone else laughed, but I didn't get the joke.
5.
When you get to know him, I think you'll really like him.
6.
I need to speak to Martina urgently, but I just can't get a hold of her.
7.
I want to get rid of that awful painting, but I can't because it was a wedding present from my mother-in-law.
8.
I'm going to get back at my brother for telling my parents I got home late. Now, I won't lend him my bike.
9.
He's going to get into trouble with his wife if he's late again.
10.
I tried to walk past him, but he wouldn't get out of the way.
3.4. Idioms with get. 1. I.
Get real. There's no way you can afford that car.
2. J.
Get a life. You're 40 and you're still living with your parents.
3. A.
I'm not getting anywhere with this crossword puzzle. It's just too difficult for me.
4. F.
She really gets on my nerves. Everything about her irritates me. Her voice, her smile, everything.
5. D.
She really needs to get her act together. Her exam is in 2 weeks, and she hasn't even started studying.
6. C.
They get along like a house on fire. They have exactly the same tastes and interests.
7. E.
You should get a move on. If you don't leave soon, you'll miss the train.
8. B.
Your grandfather must be getting on in age. Is he in his 80s now?
9. H.
My boyfriend just never gets the message. I keep dropping hints about us getting engaged, but he doesn't seem to notice.
10. G.
She always gets her own way. He just does whatever she tells him to.
3.5. Phrasal verbs with get. 1. J.
Get together with means meet socially.
2. A.
Get over means recover from.
3. K.
Get on with means continue doing.
4. D.
Get through to means make somebody understand.
5. B.
Get into means start a career or profession.
6. C.
Get around means move from place to place.
7. L.
Get away with means do something wrong without getting caught.
8. E.
Get by means manage with what you have.
9. F.
Get behind means fail to make enough progress.
10. G.
Get you down means depress you.
11. I.
Get out of means avoid a responsibility or obligation.
12. H.
Get back to means respond to somebody by speaking or writing.
3.6.
A first date is loaded with expectation. Will I like them and will they like me? Is this person going to be the one, or will I want to run for the door before the appetizer? Will we have anything to talk about, and if not, how will we get through the evening? Here's relationship expert Jenny with some suggestions on how to make sure that your first date is the best it can be, even if it turns out to be your only date.
Hello there. My first tip is choose the venue carefully. That is the place where you're going to meet. Try to avoid very noisy places where you can't hear each other, or places where you can't talk, like movie theaters. So a good place to meet might be a quiet coffee shop for some locally roasted coffee, for example, or lunch in a little local place you know. The advantage of keeping the first date short and sweet, meeting for coffee or for lunch rather than dinner, is that if you don't like each other, you don't have to make it through a 7-course meal together. And of course, if you do like each other, you can either extend the date or plan a longer one for next time. Tip number 2 is make an effort with your appearance. Obviously, you don't want to make so much of an effort that your date wouldn't recognize you if they saw you on the street the next day. But getting your hair done, say, or wearing something you know you look good in, those kinds of things show that you care and that you want to make a good impression. I mean, if you turn up with unwashed hair, wearing yesterday's clothes, you aren't likely to win anyone over. The third tip, and it's an important one, is be kind, even if you think the date is going nowhere. It doesn't cost anything, and it'll make a big difference for how much the other person enjoys themselves. Of course, being kind also means not lying or giving your date false hope. Don't tell someone that you'll call and that you can't wait to see them again if you have absolutely no intention of following through. Tip number 4, which is sort of related to number 3, is don't forget your manners. Make sure you turn up on time, and if you're going to be late for whatever reason, let your date know. Try not to yawn even if you're getting a little tired. Turn off your phone, and if the other person is footing the bill, remember to say thank you. And one last thing while we're on the subject of manners. You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat waiters and waitresses. So don't just be polite to your date. Be polite to the other people too. Number 5 is, don't pretend to be anything you're not. It can be very tempting to exaggerate or to dress up the truth, or just to plain lie to try to get your date interested. Of course, you may get away with it if you don't see the person again after the first date, but if the relationship does last any longer, you may find yourself in a tricky situation further down the line. So, for example, if you're separated, don't say that you're divorced. If you hate baseball, don't say that you can't think of a better way to spend a Saturday afternoon than cheering for the Chicago Cubs. And if you work part-time in a call center, don't say you're something big in communications. Finally, and this is my last tip, don't make an instant judgment. Many of us make up our minds about whether we like someone in the first few seconds or minutes of meeting them. But you know, first impressions can be misleading, so try not to rule someone out right away. It's much better to spend a little time getting to know them, and if you're not sure about someone, it may take 2 or 3 dates before you can really decide. If you make a snap decision, you may risk missing out on the love of your life.
Jenny, thank you very much for the advice. And now we turn to the next.
3.7. 1.
The advantage of keeping the first date short and sweet is that if you don't like each other, you don't have to make it through a 7-course meal together.
2.
If you turn up with unwashed hair, wearing yesterday's clothes, you aren't likely to win anyone over.
3.
Don't tell someone that you'll call and that you can't wait to see them again if you have absolutely no intention of following through.
4.
Turn off your phone, and if the other person is footing the bill, remember to say thank you.
5.
It can be very tempting to exaggerate or to dress up the truth, or just to plain lie.
6.
Many of us make up our minds about whether we like someone in the first few seconds or minutes of meeting them.
7.
Try not to rule someone out right away.
8.
If you make a snap decision, you may risk missing out on the love of your life.
3.8. Conflict and warfare. Weapons. 3.
Arrow.
2.
Bow.
1.
Cannon.
4.
Helmet.
6.
Shield.
5.
Spear.
7.
Sword.
3.9. People and events. A. 1.
Casualties.
2.
Refugees.
3.
Forces.
4.
Troops.
5.
Commander.
6.
The wounded.
7.
Civilians.
8.
Snipers.
9.
Survivors.
10.
Ally.
B. 1.
Rebellion.
2.
Coup.
3.
Revolution.
4.
Ceasefire.
5.
Civil War.
6.
Siege.
7.
Treaty.
3.10. Verbs. 1.
The rebels overthrew the government.
2.
Fighting broke out between the rebels and the army.
3.
The army shelled the rebel positions.
4.
The rebels retreated.
5.
Some of the rebels surrendered.
6.
The rebels blew up the airport runway.
7.
The government declared war on the rebels.
8.
Some rebels looted the city.
9.
The army captured over 300 rebels.
10.
They finally defeated the rebels.
11.
The army released most of the rebel prisoners.
12.
They executed the rebel leader.
3.11.
Capture, captive, captor, captive, capture.
Command, commander, commanding, command.
Execution, executioner, execute.
History, historian, historic, historical.
Looting, looter, loot.
Rebellion, rebel, rebellious, rebel.
Revolution, revolutionary, revolutionary, revolt.
Siege, besieged, besiege.
Survival, survivor, surviving, survive.
Victory, victor, victorious.
3.12. Part 1.
How important is historical accuracy in a historical movie?
The notion of accuracy in history is a really difficult one in drama because, it's like saying, well, was Macbeth accurate? Is Shakespearean drama accurate? The thing is, it's not about historical accuracy. It's about whether you can make a drama work from history that means something to an audience now. So I tend to take the view that, in a way, accuracy isn't the issue when it comes to the drama. If you're writing a drama, you have the right as a writer to create the drama that works for you, so you can certainly change details. The truth is, nobody really knows how people spoke in Rome, or how people spoke in the courts of Charles II, or William the Conqueror, or Victoria, or whoever. You have an idea from writing, from books, plays, and so on. We know when certain things happened, what sort of dates happened. I think it's really a question of judgment. If you make history ridiculous, if you change detail to the point where history is an absurdity, then obviously things become more difficult. The truth is, the more recent history is, the more difficult it is not to be authentic to it. In a way, it's much easier to play fast and loose with the details of what happened in Rome than it is to play fast and loose with the details of what happened in the Iraq War, say, So it's all a matter of perspective in some ways. It's something that you have to be aware of and which you try to be faithful to, but you can't ultimately say a drama has to be bound by the rules of history because that's not what drama is.
Do you think that the writer has a responsibility to represent any kind of historical truth?
Not unless that's his intention. If it's your intention to be truthful to history and you put a piece out saying, this is the true story of, say, the murder of Julius Caesar exactly as the historical record has it, then of course you do have an obligation, because if you then deliberately tell lies about it, you're deceiving your audience. If, however, you say you're writing a drama about the assassination of Julius Caesar purely from your own perspective and entirely in a fictional context, then you have the right to tell the story however you like. I don't think you have any obligation except to the story that you are telling. What you can't be is deliberately dishonest. You can't say, this is true, when you know full well it isn't.
3.13. Part 2.
Can you think of any examples where you feel the facts have been twisted too far?
Well, I think the notion of whether a historical film, has gone too far in presenting a dramatized fictional version of the truth is really a matter of personal taste. The danger is with any historical film that if that becomes the only thing that the audience sees on that subject, if it becomes the received version of the truth, as it were, because people don't always make the distinction between movies and reality and history, then obviously if that film is grossly irresponsible or grossly fantastic in its presentation of the truth, that could, I suppose, become controversial. I mean, if the only thing anybody is ever likely to know about Spartacus, for example, the movie, is Kirk Douglas and all his friends standing up and saying, "I am Spartacus, I am Spartacus," which is a wonderful moment, and it stands for the notion of freedom of individual choice and so on. So Spartacus, the film made in 1962, I think, if memory serves, has become, I think, for nearly everybody who knows anything about Spartacus, the only version of the truth. Now, in fact, we don't know if any of that is true, really. There are some accounts of the historical Spartacus, but very, very few, and virtually the only thing that's known about is that there was a man called Spartacus, and there was a rebellion, and many people were crucified at the end of it, as in the film. Whether that's irresponsible, I don't know. I can't say that I think it is. I think in a way it's Spartacus is a film that had a resonance in the modern era. There are other examples, A lot of people felt that the version of William Wallace that was presented in Braveheart was really pushing the limits of what history could stand. In effect, his whole career was invented in the film, or at least, built onto such a degree that some people felt that perhaps it was more about the notion of Scotland as an independent country than it was about history as an authentic spectacle. But again, these things are a matter of purely personal taste. I mean, I enjoyed Braveheart immensely.
3.14 Interview with the Professor of Classics. Part 1.
Professor Beard, what's the secret to getting people interested in the Romans, in ancient history?
Well, you have to go about it the right way, really. And I think that perhaps starting from rather arcane and difficult bits of literature isn't the right way. But, one thing that you see in Britain is one thing that we know is that an awful lot of our culture and our geography and our place names and so on are actually formed by the Romans. You ask somebody, why do you think so many English place names end in Chester or Castor? Manchester, Doncaster. And they'll often say, I don't know. And then you say, that's because that bit Castor is from the Latin for military camp. And every place that ends Castor or Chester once had a Roman fort on it. And I've got a pretty 99% success record with getting people interested after that. Because suddenly it is a question not of these remote people who wrote some literature that you probably suspect would be boring. It's the people who formed the geography of our country and much of Europe. Why is London the capital of Britain? It's because the Romans made it so.
What do you think we can learn from Roman history?
In political terms, many of the issues and questions and dilemmas that we face now were faced by the Romans, and in many ways we're still thinking about and using their answers. One classic example of that is a famous incident in Roman history in 63 BC, where there's a terrorist plot in the city of Rome to assassinate the political leaders, to torch the city, and to take over. A revolution. And that plot is discovered by one of the most famous Romans of all, Marcus Tullius Cicero, the great orator and wit of Roman culture. And he discovers the plot, he lays it before the Senate, he then decides to execute the leading conspirators without trial, summary execution. And a couple of years later, he's exiled. Now, in many ways, that's the kind of problem we're still facing with modern responses to terrorism. I mean, how far should Homeland Security be more important than civil rights? What about those people in Guantanamo Bay without trial? Where does the boundary come between the safety of the state and the liberty of the citizen? Now, the Romans were debating that in the 60s BC, and in many ways we're debating it along the same terms, and in part we've learnt from how they debated those rights and wrongs.
3.15 Interview with a Professor of Classics. Part 2.
If you could go back in time, is there one particular historical period that you'd like to go back to?
I think it'd be a terrible kind of punishment to be made to go back in history, particularly if you're a woman. There is not a single historical period in world history where women had halfway as decent a time as they do now. So deciding to go back there, that would be a self-inflicted punishment. I think I'd rather go in the future. And there's also, even for men, there's considerable disadvantages about the past, no antibiotics and no aspirin.
Today we live in a celebrity culture, but in Meet the Romans, you focus on the lives of the ordinary people in Rome. Was that a conscious decision to try to get people away from celebrity culture?
I was rather pleased that people did actually find, the non-celebrity version of the Romans interesting. And in some ways, if it was a small antidote to modern celebrity culture, I'm extremely pleased. I think that wasn't quite what was driving me, though, because I think the celebrities of the ancient world are so remote from us in some ways. And one of the things that puts people off ancient history is that the big narrative books, the history of the big men, never seem to answer all those questions that we know we all want to know about the ancient world, or any period in the past. Where did they go to the loo? And actually, I think people are often shortchanged about in terms of the providing an answer to questions which are really good ones. In the end, most of us, most women, don't know about men, most women, do really want to know what having a baby was like before the advent of modern obstetrics. That's a big question. It's not it's not simply because it's intimate and female. It doesn't mean it's a less important question than why Julius Caesar was assassinated. And actually, world history contains a lot more people like me and my family, and women and slaves, and people who, want to do many of the things that we want to do, but they can't clean their teeth because there's no such thing as an ancient toothbrush. Now, how does that feel? And I'm not saying in that, I guess, that those big blokish issues aren't important. The assassination of Julius Caesar, is an event in world history that has formed how we look at every other assassination since. When Kennedy's assassinated, we see that partly in relationship to that formative, defining bit of political assassination in Rome. But it's not the only way that Rome's important.
3.16 Interview with a Professor of Classics. Part 3.
As a historian, how important do you think it is that historical movies should be accurate?
I'm not sure quite how keen I am on accuracy above everything else. The most important thing, if I was going to make a historical movie, I'd really want to get people interested. And I think that film and television program makers can be a bit sort of nerdish about accuracy. I remember a friend of mine once told me that he'd acted as an advisor for some Roman film. And the crew were always ringing up when they were on location, saying things like, "Now, what kind of dog should we have? Should it, if we're going to have a dog in the film, should it be an Alsatian or, a Dachshund or whatever?" And, to start with, he said he'd go to the library and he'd kind of look up and he'd find a breed. And eventually, after question after question, he'd think, look, these guys are getting the whole of Roman history in the big picture utterly wrong, and yet there they are worrying about the damn dogs.
Can you think of any historical movies that you've really enjoyed?
I absolutely loved Gladiator. Never mind its horribly schmaltzy plot. I thought in all kinds of ways it was just a wonderful, brilliant, and I don't know if it was accurate, but a justifiable recreation of ancient Rome. The beginning scenes of Gladiator, which show, Roman combat, just in a sense punctured the kind of slightly sanitized version of, legionaries standing, with all their shields, facing the enemy, all looking ever so kind of neat and tidy. I mean, it was messy and it was bloody and it was horrible, and it was such a different kind of image of Roman combat that I remember we set it in Cambridge as an exam question. How would students judge that kind of representation of Roman warfare?
It's very interesting that there seem to be more and more historical movies recently, and many have won Oscars. Is that because history has all the best stories?
Yes, there's no such good story as a true story, and that's what history's got going for it. Actually, non-fiction in a kind of way is always a better yarn than fiction is, and I think it's. I feel very pleased because, and I think, for one thing, it gets some of the best stories from history into the popular. Into popular attention, popular consciousness. But I think also, it shows that you don't always have to be deadly serious about history. History, like classics, is often treated as something which is good for you, but isn't actually going to be much fun. You'll be improved by knowing about it, but it probably will be a bit tedious in the process. And I think that, showing that history can be larky, it can be funny, it can be surprising, it can be something that you can sit down and have a good 2.5 hours at the cinema enjoying, is really all to the good.
3.17 Interview with a professor of classics. Looking at language. 1.
An awful lot of our culture and our geography and our place names and so on are actually formed by the Romans.
2.
One classic example of that is a famous incident in Roman history in 63 BC, where there's a terrorist plot in the city of Rome.
3.
Now, in many ways, that's the kind of problem we're still facing.
4.
How far should homeland security be more important than civil rights?
5.
And in part, we've learnt from how they debated those rights and wrongs.
6.
If it was a small antidote to modern celebrity culture, I'm extremely pleased.
7.
Look, these guys are getting the whole of Roman history in the big picture utterly wrong.
8.
But I think also, it shows that you don't always have to be deadly serious about history.
3.18 1. Is there a period of history that you would like to go back to?
I'd really like to go back to Tudor England, 16th century England.
Why that period?
Well, I'm doing a PhD in the music of that period, and I just think it's such a fascinating time because there was so much change happening in the way people lived their lives, their religion, the way the politics of the country was working. It must have been a really exciting time to live.
Is there a person from history that you admire or find especially fascinating?
There was a lady called Bess of Hardwick who owned a lot of property in Derbyshire. She was a real social climber. She lived through Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary I and Elizabeth I, and into a bit of James I as well. So she had a really long life, really exciting life, and she started from absolutely nothing and worked her way right to the top. I think she must have been a really amazing lady to know.
2. Is there a period of history that you would like to go back to?
I think I would have loved to be around in California in the 60s. I think it sounds like it was a really exciting time. I think there was a lot of frightening things happening in Vietnam, but people were excited and excited about the potential, I think, of something new and really exploring their freedom, I guess.
Is there a person from history that you admire or find especially fascinating?
I think I most admire Nelson Mandela. I'm South African, so he's the first person that comes to mind. I think he was an incredible person and an amazing leader. So, I would have loved to have met him.
3. Is there a period of history that you would like to go back to?
That's a weird one. I don't know. History was pretty brutal. Life was really quite hard. There are some aspects of it that I'd like, where time was slower, life was defined by the seasons and daylight, and you didn't have the same sort of pressures as you do now. So I'd like aspects of it, but I'm not sure I'd really like to go back to the actual way of life.
Is there a person from history that you admire or find especially fascinating?
Probably Queen Elizabeth I, because she managed to be the queen in a society where women weren't expected to have or hold or command any power and respect, and that they were meant to do the bidding of men and their families. And she actually stood up and was a person to be counted.
4. Is there a period of history that you would like to go back to?
Yes, there's a period I'd like to go back to, absolutely. I love ancient Greece, I love ancient Athens, and I think it would be so amazing to spend time there and see what it was like being in the Agora with, Plato and Aristotle and talking, and that entire world would be very, very interesting to me.
Is there a person from history that you admire or find especially fascinating?
A person from history that I find that I admire. There are a lot of people. I study a lot of ancient history, so I would love to meet Julius Caesar or someone like that who really transformed the entire world with his actions. And he has a very unique personality. He was a very cocky person, and it'd be fun to just see what he was like in person and see how he was able to kind of take over the entire Roman Empire by himself.
5. Is there a period of history that you would like to go back to?
I think I'd like to go back to the Renaissance, like the 14th and 15th century, maybe in Italy.
Why that period?
I think there was a lot of innovation and interesting new ideas coming up in that time period.
Is there a person from history that you admire or find especially fascinating?
I've read a lot about Filippo Brunelleschi, who was in Florence in Italy during the Renaissance and helped build the Duomo, the dome, in Italy.
3.19. 1.
She was a real social climber.
2.
I think I would have loved to be around in California.
3.
She actually stood up and was a person to be counted.
4.
He was a very cocky person.
5.
I think there was a lot of innovation and interesting new ideas coming up in that time period.
4.1 Sounds and the human voice. A.
Bang.
Buzz.
Click.
Crash.
Creak.
Crunch.
Drip.
Hiss.
Honk.
Hum.
Rattle.
Roar.
Screech.
Slam.
Slurp.
Sniff.
Snore.
Splash.
Tap.
Tick.
Whistle.
4.2 Sounds. B. 1,
Tick.
2,
Sniff.
3,
Click.
4,
Splash.
5,
Bang.
6,
Creak.
7,
Buzz.
8,
Honk.
9,
Tap.
10,
Slurp.
11,
Hiss.
12,
Drip.
13,
Roar.
14,
Whistle.
15,
Hum.
16,
Slam.
17,
Crunch.
18,
Snore.
19,
Rattle.
20,
Screech. Crash.
4.3 The human voice. 1,
Scream.
2,
Yell.
3,
Giggle.
4,
Whisper.
5,
Mumble.
6,
Groan.
7,
Stutter.
8,
Sob.
9,
Sigh.
4.4. 1,
Oh no.
2,
He's got my bag!
Three.
No, it's gonna be fine. No, I'm really scared. No, it's gonna be really cool.
4.5. At the beginning of a word. 2 sounds.
Click.
Slam.
Crash.
Slurp.
Drip.
Snore.
Stutter.
3 sounds.
Screech.
Scream.
Splash.
At the end of a word. 2 sounds.
Shouts.
Sniffs.
Yelled.
Hummed.
3 sounds.
Crunched.
Mumble.
Gasps.
Rattled.
4.6. 1,
She screamed when her friend splashed her in the swimming pool.
2,
The brakes screeched, and then there was a tremendous crash.
3,
My coworker slurps and gasps for breath when he drinks anything.
4.7. 1,
Sounds or noises that particularly annoy me, I would say dogs barking, very irritating, they just don't stop. Especially the small yappy dogs, they just go on and on and on and just keep yapping at you. And I just find that extremely irritating because there isn't any real way to quiet them down, like a child or something. You can tell them to be quiet, but a dog, no, they'll just keep going.
2,
Any noises that annoy me. I suppose I'm annoyed by excessively creative cell phone ringers that can be of overly popular songs or themes from television shows that people obviously think are really cute, but I probably don't think they are as cute.
3,
The one sound I really hate is car horns, which you hear an awful lot of in cities. And the reason I hate them is because, in my mind, at least, a car horn is meant to be a warning. But of course, nobody uses them for warnings anymore. They use them because they're angry and impatient. And it seems to me that it's like shouting at somebody, and I don't like hearing that expression of anger all around me from dozens of cars.
4,
For me, the most annoying sound is the buzzing noise of a mosquito. When you're just falling asleep in your bedroom at night and you hear that sound and it's just terrible. I actually can't sleep until I've stopped the sound by killing the mosquito. So what I tend to do is, I tend to leave the light off, actually, and just follow the sound and just search the room for the sound for as long as I can until I can track it down and kill it. Because otherwise, I can't sleep knowing that I will wake up in the morning covered in mosquito bites.
5.
I work in an office, and the person who sits next to me, Julie, she crunches on rice cakes every lunchtime, and it's really annoying, and I don't know what to say to her or how to put it, or if I do tell her now, she'll know I've been annoyed for the last 4 years. But I think she's leaving soon, so maybe I'll just have to deal with it for the next few weeks or months.
4.8.
London, as well as other big cities, has often been accused of being an unfriendly place. But is it really? And if it is, does it matter? And what could or should we do about it? Today, I'm talking to Polly Ackhurst, one of the co-founders of Talk to Me London, an organization whose goal is to get people talking to each other. Hello, Polly.
Hello.
Could you start by telling us about Talk to Me London?
Sure. Talk to Me London is all about finding ways for people to talk to other people they don't know. And we do this through fun activities, including a badge or pin which says Talk to Me London on it and shows that you're open to conversation, as well as through regular events that get people talking. And we are also organising a Talk to Me London Day at the end of August.
And how did you get the idea for it? I mean, do you personally find London unfriendly?
Well, I personally talk to a lot of people I don't know, and I think that's where the idea came from. I found that the conversations that I have with people just kind of randomly have been hugely kind of beneficial, really. So I might have made new friends, new business connections. Sometimes they just cheer up my day. So Talk to Me London comes from this idea of, what happens if we do start talking to each other more, and you are able to see more opportunities and possibilities there.
Have you ever been anywhere, either in the UK, the US, or maybe abroad, a large city, which you thought was a really friendly place, which made you think you wish London was like that?
There are definitely places that I've found friendlier than London, but I think that we all kind of change a bit when we travel, and when we're out of our normal circumstances, we feel like, more free to do things, and perhaps talking to people is one of them. There is a tendency for people say that Mediterranean countries are friendlier, however, or Latino countries even, but there was a similar initiative to this which was set up in Madrid a couple of years ago, which I think indicates that they're facing the same problem as us, and perhaps, points to the fact that this is a phenomenon in all large cities.
So you wouldn't say it was a uniquely London problem?
No, I wouldn't, no.
You've had some very high-profile support for Talk to Me London. On your website, I think there's a quote from Boris Johnson saying what a wonderful idea it sounds like. But on the other hand, there's been some negative media coverage that must have been discouraging for you.
I mean, I don't think so. I think that this idea is quite controversial in some ways because we're trying to encourage people to think about the way that they act and to reflect on that and to possibly change that. So it hasn't really been surprising for us that we've had the negative coverage.
And what would you say to people, and there are plenty of them, I think, people who would say, I'm sitting on the bus, I'm sitting on the train, I really don't want to talk to anybody, I really don't want anyone to talk to me, I just want to read my book or listen to my music or whatever. What would you say to those people?
I would say that it's not about everyone talking to everyone else. It's about enabling those people who want to talk to do so, basically. So that's why all the things that we do are opt-in. So the pin, for example, you wear it if you want to talk. If you don't want to talk, you don't have to wear it. So, this isn't something for everyone, but we want to give people the choice between talking or not talking. and currently there doesn't really seem to be that choice.
Well, I wish you all the best with the project. I hope it's extremely successful, and thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks a lot.
4.9 James's story.
I was heading home at rush hour a few weeks ago. I was tired and bored, and there was this guy standing beside me reading a book. So I started reading it over his shoulder. It was all about the history of popular social movements. I couldn't see the title, so I asked him what it was called. Surprisingly, he reacted positively and told me the name. He told me that he commuted for 2 hours each day and that he always tried to read something enlightening because it made him feel better about his life and being productive by the time he got home. It was such a nice, unexpected conversation, and it got me thinking about my own reading habits.
Annika's story.
I was getting the last train back home one evening, and I had to wait a long time on the platform, so I started talking to the girl sitting next to me. She was Czech and had just come to the UK with her boyfriend for work. She was a science graduate in the Czech Republic, but was working at a sandwich shop. I suppose in many ways it was a pretty typical story, but she was so upbeat and positive about London and living in the UK. At the end of the journey, she emphasised how good it was to talk and pulled out a sandwich from her bag and gave it to me. I was both shocked and grateful. Maybe my stomach had been rumbling too loudly.
Philippa's story.
I was on the train home today, and this young man asked me how my day had been. We talked about the area and iPads and TV and that kind of thing. Then I mentioned the concept of Talk to Me London and encouraged him not to stop talking to people. An older lady in the meantime had sat down by us and thought the fact that we were talking was nice. And then I bumped into an old neighbor from about 10 years ago and we caught up. When he got off the train, the guy opposite me mentioned how nice it was to see us catching up, and then we got talking too. It was exciting. It was contagious. I had a smile on my face for the rest of the day.
Elise's story.
I was standing on a bus, and I would have thought I'd looked unapproachable, but instead, a man sitting close by saw I was carrying a guitar. He gave me a big smile and asked if I'd play him a song. Before long, we were talking about traveling and living in different countries and cities around the world and about music. He was leaving the next day for a few months of travel around South America. Because the man was a small distance away from where I was standing, quite a few people nearby were able to hear us talk, and many of them also joined in. It felt a little surreal, stepping off the bus later, smiling and saying goodbye to a bunch of strangers as though they were longtime friends.
4.10 Emphasizing that something is your own opinion. 1,
I'd say that
2,
If you ask me,
3,
personally, I think that
4,
personally speaking,
5,
in my opinion,
6,
in my view,
7,
I feel that
8,
my feeling is that
9,
as far as I'm concerned,
4.11 1,
Moving.
2,
Thought-provoking.
3,
Slow-paced.
4,
Gripping.
5,
Entertaining.
6,
Intriguing.
7,
Implausible.
8,
Fast-moving.
9,
Depressing.
10,
Haunting.
4.12. 1.
The author's talk was very long.
2.
He thought the plot was implausible.
3.
I always feel I ought to read more.
4.
I caught him yawning as he read a book in bed.
5.
The audience was haunted by the story about war.
6.
We all thought the ending was awful.
4.13.
What made you want to be a translator?
It was something that I'd done when I was in college, and when I moved to Spain, it was difficult to get a job that wasn't teaching English. So I went back home and I took a postgraduate course in translation. After taking the course, I swore that I would never be a translator. I thought it would be too boring, but I kept doing the odd translation, and eventually I came around to the idea because I liked the idea of working for myself, and it didn't require too much investment to get started. And actually, I enjoy working with words, and it's very satisfying when you feel that you've produced a reasonable translation of the original text.
What are the pros and cons of being a translator?
Well, it's a lonely job, I guess. You know, you're on your own most of the time. It's hard work. You're sitting there and, you're working long hours, and you can't schedule things because you don't know when more work is going to come in. And people always have tight deadlines. It's really rare that somebody will call you and say, I want this translation in 3 months. That just doesn't really happen.
And the pros?
Well, the pros are that it gives you freedom, because you can do it anywhere if you have an internet connection and electricity. And I guess you can organize your time because you're freelance, you're your own boss, which is good. I like that.
What advice would you give someone who's thinking of going into translation?
I'd say, in addition to the language, get a specialty. Take another course in anything that interests you, like economics, law, history, art, because you really need to know about the subjects that you're translating into.
What do you think is the most difficult kind of text to translate?
Literary texts like novels, poetry, or drama, because you have to give a lot of consideration to the author and to the way it's been written in the original language.
In order to translate a novel well, do you think you need to be a novelist yourself?
I think that's true ideally, yes.
And is that the case? I mean, are most of the well-known translators of novels, generally speaking, novelists in their own right?
Yes, I think in English anyway, people who translate into English tend to be published authors, and they tend to specialize in a particular author in the other language. And of course, if it's a living author, then it's so much easier because you can actually communicate with the author and say, what did you really mean here?
Another thing I've heard that is very hard to translate is advertising, for example, slogans.
Yeah, well, with advertising, the problem is that it has to be something punchy and it's very difficult to translate that. For example, one of the Coca-Cola ads, the slogan in English was, "The real thing." But you just couldn't translate that literally into Spanish. It just wouldn't have had the same power. In fact, it became Sensación de Vivir, which is sensation of living, which sounds really good in Spanish, but it would sound weird in English.
What about movie titles?
They're horrific, too. People always complain that they haven't been translated accurately, but of course, it's impossible because sometimes a literal translation just doesn't work.
For example?
Okay, well, think of, the Julie Andrews movie, The Sound of Music? Well, that works in English because it's a phrase that you know. Like, I can hear the sound of music. But it doesn't work at all in other languages. And in Spanish, it was called sonrisas y lágrimas, which means smiles and tears. Now in German, it was called Meine Lieder, meine Träume, which means my songs, my dreams. And in Italian, it was tutti insieme appassionatamente, which means I think all together passionately, or I don't know, something like that. In fact, I think it was translated differently all over the world.
Do you think there are special problems translating movie scripts for the subtitles?
Yes, a lot. There are special constraints. For example, the translation has to fit on the screen as the actor is speaking. And so sometimes the translation is a paraphrase rather than a direct translation. And of course, well, going back to untranslatable things, really the big problems are cultural and humor, because they're just not the same. You can get across the idea, but you might need pages to explain it, and, by that time the movie has moved on. I also sometimes think that the translators are given the movie on DVD. I mean, rather than a written script, and that sometimes they've simply misheard or they didn't understand what the people said. And that's the only explanation I can come up with for some of the mistranslations that I've seen. Although sometimes it might be that some things like humor and jokes, especially ones that depend on wordplay, are just, they're simply untranslatable. And often it's very difficult to get the right register. For example, with slang and swear words. Because if you literally translate taboo words or swear words, even if they exist in the other language, they may well be far more offensive.
4.14 Part 1
What made you want to be a translator?
It was something that I'd done when I was in college, and when I moved to Spain, it was difficult to get a job that wasn't teaching English. So I went back home and I took a postgraduate course in translation. After taking the course, I swore that I would never be a translator. I thought it would be too boring, but I kept doing the odd translation, and eventually I came around to the idea because I liked the idea of working for myself, and it didn't require too much investment to get started. And actually, I enjoy working with words, and it's very satisfying when you feel that you've produced a reasonable translation of the original text.
What are the pros and cons of being a translator?
Well, it's a lonely job, I guess. You're on your own most of the time. It's hard work. You're sitting there and, you're working long hours, and you can't schedule things because you don't know when more work is going to come in. And people always have tight deadlines. It's really rare that somebody will call you and say, I want this translation in 3 months. That just doesn't really happen.
And the pros?
Well, the pros are that it gives you freedom, because you can do it anywhere if you have an internet connection and electricity. And I guess you can organize your time because you're freelance, you're your own boss, which is good. I like that.
What advice would you give someone who's thinking of going into translation?
I'd say in addition to the language, get a specialty. Take another course in anything that interests you, like economics, law, history, art, because you really need to know about the subjects that you're translating into.
4.15 Part 2
What do you think is the most difficult kind of text to translate?
Literary texts like novels, poetry, or drama, because you have to give a lot of consideration to the author and to the way it's been written in the original language.
In order to translate a novel well, do you think you need to be a novelist yourself?
I think that's true ideally, yes.
And is that the case? I mean, are most of the well-known translators of novels, generally speaking, novelists in their own right?
Yes, I think in English anyway, people who translate into English tend to be published authors, and they tend to specialize in a particular author in the other language. And of course, if it's a living author, then it's so much easier because you can actually communicate with the author and say, like, what did you really mean here?
Another thing I've heard that is very hard to translate is advertising, for example, slogans.
Yeah, well, with advertising, the problem is that it has to be something punchy and it's very difficult to translate that. For example, one of the Coca-Cola ads, the slogan in English was, "The real thing." But you just couldn't translate that literally into Spanish. It just wouldn't have had the same power. In fact, it became sensación de vivir, which is sensation of living, which sounds really good in Spanish, but it would sound weird in English.
4.16. Part 3.
What about movie titles?
They're horrific too. People always complain that they haven't been translated accurately, but of course, it's impossible because sometimes a literal translation just doesn't work.
For example?
Okay, well, think of, the Julie Andrews movie, The Sound of Music? Well, that works in English because it's a phrase that you know. Like, I can hear the sound of music. But it doesn't work at all in other languages. And in Spanish, it was called sonrisas y lágrimas, which means smiles and tears. Now in German, it was called meine Lieder, meine Träume, which means my songs, my dreams. And in Italian, it was tutti insieme appassionatamente, which means I think all together passionately, or I don't know, something like that. In fact, I think it was translated differently all over the world.
Do you think there are special problems translating movie scripts for the subtitles?
Yes, a lot. There are special constraints. For example, the translation has to fit on the screen as the actor is speaking. And so sometimes the translation is a paraphrase rather than a direct translation. And of course, going back to untranslatable things, really the big problems are cultural and humor, because they're just not the same. You can get across the idea, but you might need pages to explain it, and, by that time the movie has moved on. I also sometimes think that the translators are given the movie on DVD. I mean, rather than a written script, and that sometimes they've simply misheard or they didn't understand what the people said. And that's the only explanation I can come up with for some of the mistranslations that I've seen. Although sometimes it might be that some things like humor and jokes, especially ones that depend on wordplay, are just, they're simply untranslatable. And often it's very difficult to get the right register. For example, with slang and swear words. Because if you literally translate taboo words or swear words, even if they exist in the other language, they may well be far more offensive.
4.17.
In the very heart of New York City, under the bright neon lights of Times Square, lies Midtown Comics. No comic store in the U.S. is larger. And deep shelves mean room for all sorts of comics and comic book fans.
There's never a normal day at Midtown Comics.
It's a place where fiction comes to life. Alongside fans, you'll find the writers, comic book artists, and dedicated collectors who make up the community. They are drawn by the stunning artwork and thrilling adventures, which come together to unleash the imagination. Each and every comic book is the end result of a very long process, which starts with a dream.
My name is Chris Notarilli.
Comic books have inspired me to create my own heroes.
The streets and skylines of New York have been fictionalized as the backdrop for some of the best-known superhero fiction. A New Yorker himself, Chris feels at home in the superhero genre. He's all set to create his own comic book.
The dream is to bring the Protector to life and go from this comic character into ultimately a feature film. I just want it.
I've been going to Midtown Comics on and off most of my life. Basically, careers begin there.
I'm making a comic book. What are some of the steps I'd have to take to get it into Midtown, basically?
I get pitched ideas all the time. I can only put his comic on the shelves if it's good enough. Best thing you could do is to work really hard on the book. Chris has got to prove to me that his comic is as good as he says it is.
Chris has the character designs, the script, and a couple of pages from the book. But if he wants it on the shelves for the next Young Writers event at Midtown, he is going to have to speed things up. 4 weeks to go, and the countdown begins.
Okay, cool. Great. Thanks.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem.
The love of comic books runs in Chris's blood.
My dad is a graphic artist. He's actually a professional illustrator. He is one of the top illustrators in his profession.
So getting the book ready in full color by the agreed deadline is now a family effort. His dad has the expertise and is willing to put in the time, but it's up to Chris to put together a successful pitch.
I need to make this happen. There is no plan B.
Succeeding against what look like insurmountable odds is a superhero characteristic. They triumph when all else fails. And I think that's where Christopher got a lot of his resolve.
What happens to him? He stays strong. He does not give up. He's a character built on endurance.
Action.
Protecting people from the dangers of the city is just as important as fighting criminal masterminds. And it's in the everyday superhero struggle that he's able to prove his worth. The same goes for Chris, who during the filming is faced with his fair share of unexpected obstacles.
Good, get inside, get inside. And that's a wrap.
4 long weeks of working around the clock has all come down to this one moment of truth. Is the Protector worthy of the famous Midtown shelves?
Book's finally finished, as you can see. 36 pages of pure awesomeness. This book will be on the shelves by the end of the day.
This is it?
This is the book.
It looks awesome, it really does.
Thanks. Not only did I make you a comic book, I made you a film.
The promo speaks the universal language of superhero blockbusters.
That's pretty impressive. It's the first time I've ever seen somebody come in with their own movie and their book.
Not only does Chris make the Young Artists event at Midtown, The Protector is made the Book of the Week, kickstarting Chris's career.
The superhero celebrates humanity. It's what we all aspire to be, and it gives us hope that we can be that.
People might look at the Midtown family and wonder why they spend so much time and effort on comic books or dressing up as superheroes. What is all the fuss about? But to Chris, the answer is crystal clear.
End of CD2.